The rain had started just as Daniel Reed stepped off the late bus, the kind of quiet, steady rain that made the city glow under streetlights. He pulled his old jacket tighter around his shoulders and checked the time again. 7:42 p.m. He was late. Not terribly late, but late enough that his daughter would already be sitting at the small corner table inside the restaurant, nervously looking toward the door every few seconds. He hated being late when it came to Lily. Daniel hurried down the sidewalk, dodging puddles, his worn shoes splashing lightly against the pavement. He hadn't seen his daughter in 3 months. 3 long months of overtime shifts, missed calls, and promises he kept postponing. But tonight he had made a promise he refused to break. Dinner, just the two of them. The restaurant came into view, a modest little Italian place squeezed between a bookstore and a pharmacy. Warm yellow light spilled through the windows, making the inside look cozy and welcoming. Daniel paused outside for a moment, catching his breath. Through the glass he spotted Lily instantly. She sat at the table near the window, her long brown hair tied in a simple ponytail, her hands folded neatly on the table. She was 16 now, but to him she still looked like the little girl who used to sit on his shoulders at the park. A smile spread across his tired face. He pushed open the door. A bell chimed softly. Lily looked up. "Dad." She jumped to her feet and rushed over, wrapping her arms around him before he could even say hello. Daniel laughed softly, hugging her back. "Hey, kiddo." "You're late," she said, but she was smiling. "Bus trouble," he said sheepishly. "You always blame the bus." "Because it's always the bus." They both laughed. Neither of them noticed the woman seated 2 tables away. But she noticed them. Victoria Langford had come to the restaurant hopping for a quiet dinner after a long day of meetings. Being the only daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the country meant her life was constantly scheduled, managed, and watched. Tonight she wanted anonymity. Instead, she found herself watching a man in a worn jacket laugh with his daughter like the world outside, the restaurant, didn't exist. Something about the scene caught her attention. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't impressive. It was just real. Daniel pulled out Lily's chair like a gentleman before sitting across from her. "You look taller," he said. "I'm literally the same height." "Nope, taller." She rolled her eyes. "Dad." He chuckled. A waiter came over, and Daniel ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu. Lily did the same. Victoria noticed. She also noticed the way Daniel quietly checked the prices before closing the menu. He thought no one saw. But she did. The food arrived 20 minutes later, steaming and fragrant. Daniel watched Lily take her first bite like it was the most important moment of the evening. "So," he said, "how's school?" She shrugged. "Fine. Just fine." "Okay, pretty good." "Grades?" "All A's." Daniel placed his hand dramatically over his chest. "That's my girl." Lily laughed. Victoria found herself smiling into her wine glass. But then something else caught her attention. Daniel didn't touch his food right away. He just watched Lily eat. Finally she frowned. "Dad, why aren't you eating?" "I am," he said quickly, twirling some pasta. But Victoria saw the truth. He was stretching the meal, taking tiny bites so it would last longer. As if the dinner wasn't just about food. It was about time. Lily suddenly reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded envelope. "I got something today," she said. Daniel looked curious. "What's that?" She slid it across the table. "A letter." He opened it slowly. His eyes widened. "You got accepted." Lily nodded nervously. "Early admission." Daniel stared at the paper like it was made of gold. Then he laughed, a proud, stunned laugh that turned a few heads in the restaurant. My daughter got into college. Lily smiled shyly, but then her smile faded slightly. It's expensive, though, she said quietly. Daniel didn't hesitate. We'll figure it out. How? We always do. Victoria looked down at her untouched dinner. Something inside her chest tightened. Because she had grown up surrounded by wealth, private tutors, and endless opportunities. Yet she couldn't remember the last time anyone had looked at her with the kind of pride that man had just shown his daughter. She told herself to stop watching, but she couldn't. And when Daniel finally stood up to pay the bill, she noticed something that made her pause. He counted his money twice. Daniel stood at the small counter near the register, trying to look casual while quietly counting the bills in his wallet. $42. He glanced at the receipt again. 39. Good. Just enough. He slid the cash across the counter with a relieved smile. Keep the change. Behind him, Lily was still sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone. Victoria watched the entire thing from across the room. The way Daniel had carefully checked the total. The way his shoulders relaxed when he realized he could afford it. It wasn't shameful. It was human. Victoria had grown up in a world where people never even looked at prices. Meals were charged to accounts, delivered to penthouses, or arranged by assistants. But this man had planned this dinner like it mattered. Because it did. Daniel returned to the table. Ready to head out, he asked. Lily nodded, grabbing her backpack. They both stood. That's when Lily noticed Victoria staring. Their eyes met briefly. Victoria quickly looked away. But Lily whispered, Dad, I think that lady was watching us. Daniel chuckled. Maybe she liked my jokes. You didn't make any jokes. Exactly. Lily laughed again. They started toward the door. But as Daniel reached for the handle, a voice stopped him. Excuse me. He turned. Victoria had stood up from her table. Up close, she looked even more striking, tall, elegant, dressed in a simple black coat that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. For a moment, Daniel looked confused. Yes. Victoria hesitated. She wasn't used to approaching strangers. Especially not like this. I just wanted to say, you seem like a wonderful father. Daniel blinked. Thank you. Lily looked amused. Victoria suddenly felt awkward. Why had she said that? But then she noticed the envelope Lily was holding. College acceptance, Victoria asked. Lily nodded. Congratulations. Thanks, Lily said shyly. Daniel smiled proudly again. She worked hard. Victoria could see that. There was a quiet confidence in the girl's posture. What school? She asked. Lily told her. Victoria raised her eyebrows slightly. That's an excellent university. Daniel chuckled. Yeah, we're still figuring out the how part. Lily groaned, Dad. Victoria studied them both for a moment. Then she said something surprising. Would you mind sitting down for a minute? Daniel looked confused. Why? She gave a small smile. Because I'd like to offer you something. Lily looked at her father. Daniel hesitated. Look, he said carefully, I appreciate the kindness, but we're okay. Victoria nodded. I know you are. Then she added softly. But sometimes being okay doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. Daniel studied her face. She didn't look arrogant. She looked sincere. Reluctantly, he sat back down. Lily followed. Victoria returned to her seat. My name is Victoria Langford, she said. Daniel froze. Even Lily recognized the name. The Langford family owned half the skyline downtown. Daniel cleared his throat. That Langford. Victoria smiled faintly. Unfortunately, yes. Lily looked stunned. Daniel leaned back in his chair slowly. All right, he said. Now I'm definitely curious. Victoria folded her hands. I run a private scholarship foundation, she explained, mostly for students who show exceptional academic promise. Lily's eyes widened. Victoria continued. I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. Daniel tensed slightly. But she added quickly, I'm not offering charity. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What are you offering? A scholarship interview. Lily looked like she might stop breathing. Victoria looked at her kindly. Full tuition. Daniel stared at her. That kind of thing doesn't just happen randomly in restaurants. Victoria shrugged slightly. Maybe not. Then she smiled. But sometimes life surprises us. Daniel sat silently for several seconds. Finally he asked, Why? Victoria didn't answer right away. Instead she glanced at Lily. Then back at Daniel. Because, she said quietly, tonight I watched a father who just wanted dinner with his daughter. She paused. And somehow I couldn't look away. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The soft murmur of the restaurant continued around them. Glasses clinking, quiet conversations, the smell of garlic and fresh bread floating through the air. But at their table, the world felt strangely still. Lily looked from Victoria to her father, her eyes wide with hope and confusion. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck slowly. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Victoria smiled gently. You don't have to say anything right now. But this is a lot. I know. Daniel looked at Lily. Her fingers were gripping the envelope from the university, so tightly the paper had started to bend. He recognized that look on her face. The same look she had when she was little and saw something she wanted but didn't dare ask for. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. Daniel turned back to Victoria. What's the catch? Victoria almost laughed. No catch. There's always a catch. Not this time. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Why us? Victoria rested her elbow on the table thinking. Do you know how many scholarship applications my foundation receives every year? Daniel shook his head. Thousands. Lily swallowed. Victoria continued. Most of them come with perfect essays, perfect recommendations, perfect grades. That sounds like Lily, Daniel said proudly. Victoria smiled. Yes, but tonight I saw something those applications don't show. What's that? She looked directly at him. Where that determination comes from. Daniel didn't respond. Victoria continued softly. I watched you sit there and stretch a simple dinner so you could spend more time with your daughter. Daniel looked embarrassed. I wasn't stretching it. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You took 6 bites in 20 minutes. Lily burst out laughing. Dad, she noticed. Daniel groaned. Great, I've been analyzed. Victoria laughed quietly. But that's my point. I've spent my whole life surrounded by wealth, privilege, and opportunity. Her smile faded slightly. And very little warmth. Daniel noticed the shift in her voice. You didn't grow up with dinners like that, he said. Victoria shook her head. No. She paused. My father built an empire. My mother ran charities and social events. Our house had 20 rooms. Lily blinked. 20. Victoria nodded. And I usually ate dinner alone. The table went quiet again. Daniel studied her face more carefully now. For the first time, he didn't see a billionaire heiress. He saw someone who had grown up missing something money couldn't buy. Victoria cleared her throat lightly. So when I saw you two tonight, it reminded me of something important. What's that? Lily asked. That success isn't just about money. She looked at Daniel. It's about people who believe in you before the world does. Lily slowly turned toward her father. Daniel looked suddenly uncomfortable. Hey, don't look at me like that, he muttered. You did all the work. But you helped me, she said quietly. He shrugged. That's my job. Victoria smiled. And you've done it well. Daniel leaned back again, thinking. Finally he asked, what would Lily have to do? Victoria pulled a small card from her purse and placed it on the table. Call this number tomorrow. Lily leaned forward to read it. Langford Education Foundation. Victoria continued. They'll schedule an interview, nothing complicated. We just want to hear about her goals. And if she passes. Victoria looked at Lily. Full tuition, books, housing. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel stared at the card like it might disappear. That's life-changing. Victoria nodded. That's the idea. Daniel picked up the card slowly. He looked at Lily. Her eyes were shining now. Dad. He took a deep breath. All right, he said. Victoria smiled. Good. Daniel stood up and extended his hand. Thank you. Victoria shook it. But then Daniel added something unexpected. If she gets this scholarship. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Yes. You have to promise me one thing. What's that? Daniel gestured toward the table. One dinner a month. Victoria blinked. Excuse me. With us. Lily laughed. Dad. But Daniel continued. You said you grew up eating alone. Victoria didn't speak. So if Lily's future becomes part of your foundation, he said gently, then you're part of our story too. The restaurant felt very quiet again. Victoria looked at the empty plates on the table. Then at Lily. Then at Daniel. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't expected to find tonight. A place she might actually belong. Her voice was soft when she answered. I think I'd like that. Lily grinned. Daniel nodded. And as the three of them walked out into the rainy night together, something unusual had already begun. It started as a simple dinner between a father and his daughter. But sometimes the smallest moments quietly change lives. And sometimes, the people who have everything are the ones who need those moments the most.